Did you sign up for the NSCA CSCS exam, yet haven't put any time into studying? Well, in today's video, we're going to be taking you through how to pass the CSCS exam in just 1 week. What's up, everybody? This is Nick from PTPioneer, your #1 guide for a career in fitness. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at how to pass the NSCA CSCS exam in just 1 week's worth of studying. And as always, don't forget to smash that like button. It lets us know if we're providing valuable information for you guys and lets us know what videos you like for the future. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can always know which videos are coming out in the future. Make sure to get your free copy of the CSCS exam cheat sheet. Link is in the description. Now, the NSCA CSCS exam is by far one of the most challenging exam tests in the industry. With a pass rate of only 50%, there's no denying that studying and preparation are crucial for your success at passing this exam. Your best bet is to plan for 2 to 3 months of study preparation and adhere to a strict study schedule. However, there are circumstances that may force you to take the test with less preparation time. While we don't recommend studying for the CSCS exam in just 1 week, if 1 week is all you have, there is still a method to cram for this exam effectively and efficiently. In order to pass the CSCS, you only need a 70% in both sections to fully pass the exam, so knowing most of the information can be sufficient in a less than perfect scenario. With this in mind, it's still important to remember that even if your overall score comes out to be a 70%, if you score less than 70% on either section, you will still fail the exam. Therefore, it's better to know information in most of the sections than to master a single section and be clueless on the remaining. There are a total of 7 domains in the CSCS exam split into 2 sections. The relevant domain questions are mixed up together in different sections, and the sections are administered in different sessions with a break in between. If you know you're weak in a certain section, you should definitely focus most of your time and attention on those topics. But what if you don't know any of the topics? If this is the case, you should dial in on the most heavily weighted topics. This includes exercise science, exercise technique, and program design. Bear in mind, the more questions per section, the more wiggle room you have to make mistakes. Therefore, missing just 4 questions in section 6, which only has 12 questions, would result in an automatic failure of the exam. On the other hand, missing 4 questions in the exercise science section still leaves you with a 90%, well above that 70% passing range. To truly dial in on your weakest areas, start by taking a Trainer Academy CSCS practice test, or pick up the Trainer Academy CSCS MVP package, which includes 5 practice tests covering everything on the exam. With that assessment score in hand, you'll know which sections you need to focus on and which sections you can get away with less review. You can also take quizzes throughout the week to assess progress, but remember, with such little time, most of your focus and attention should be devoted to learning the material. Now, as I said before, the CSCS exam is split into 2 sections with 7 domains containing all the information you need to know to pass the CSCS exam. After taking the Trainer Academy practice exams, you probably figured out which domains you may be weaker on and which you may be more comfortable on. Now that we know which is your weakest and your strongest, we can start to devise a plan to crush our studying in just 1 week's time. Section 1 of the CSCS exam is Scientific Principles, and this covers the 3 domains: exercise science, sports psychology, and nutrition. The Scientific Foundations section has 80 scored questions and 15 non-scored multiple choice questions. The non-scored questions are merely just questions that the NSCA will use in future exams if applicable. Section 2 of the CSCS exam is the Practical and Applied section, a bit meatier on the amount of questions they have as well as the domains that are covered. In this section, 4 domains are covered: program design, exercise technique, organization and administration, and evaluation. In the Practical and Applied section of this exam, there are 110 scored questions as well as 15 non-scored questions. Now that we've gone over the 2 sections of the CSCS exam as well as the 7 domains, let's take a bit of a deep dive into each domain and figure out what we'll need to study for in our 1 week time. The first domain covered in the Scientific Foundations section is exercise science, consisting of 44 different questions. This is really the backbone of the entire first section. The information covered in the exercise science domain is vast and will cover topics including major muscles, muscle groups, and their attachments, as well as the movements that they perform, the macrostructure and microstructure of muscles from the outer layer to the individual myofibril, the concept of motor units, muscle recruitment, the all or nothing, and size principles, functional knowledge of our human hormone system and its involvement and responses to exercise, symptoms and effects of overtraining and detraining, the implication of age, sex, and other population differences in regards to strength and conditioning, the various energy systems responsible for supplying ATP to our body during exercise. As you can see, the exercise science domain covers a vast amount of information. With 44 questions in the exercise science domain, it is the largest in both sections. And unless you score a 90% on one of your practice tests, you should consider spending substantial time on this section. Domain 2 in the Scientific Foundations section is the Sports Psychology section. With only 19 questions, you do not have to spend as much time studying the Sports Psychology domain as you did in the Exercise Science. However, you still only can afford to miss up to 5 questions in this domain if you're looking to pass this section. There's far less to memorize, recall, and analyze in the Sports Psychology domain than in the Exercise Science. The sports psychology domain will test your knowledge on the following areas: motivational theory and techniques, attentional control and decision making, types of feedback, learning styles, practice schedules, and cueing techniques for various athletes. This section will also cover indicators of mental health issues. This domain will also cover indicators of mental health issues in athletes, such as returning from an injury and common eating disorders found. Lastly, proper steps for referrals and reaching out to various healthcare providers. The third domain of the Scientific Foundations section of the exam is nutrition. With 17 questions in the nutrition domain, you can only lose up to 4 points before risking a failure on the entire section. Although this is not a nutrition certification, the NSCA expects all of their certified strength and conditioning specialists to have a decent understanding of nutrition and how it affects the athlete. Ensuring a passing score in this section, you should know macronutrient and micronutrient intake for various populations, macronutrient and micronutrient intake for various sports and populations, the glycemic index and the glycemic load and its role in performance, the number of calories in each macronutrient, the role of electrolytes and hydration in sports performance, ideal timing intake for various macronutrients, and the effects, risks, and alternatives of common performance-enhancing substances and methods. Now that we've covered the Scientific Foundations section of the CSCS exam, it's time to move on to the Practical and Applied section of the test. As said before, this section has 4 of the 7 domains included, so it is still a substantial part of the test with about 110 scored questions. The first domain included in the Practical and Applied section is exercise technique. With a whopping 40 questions included in this domain, it is a large part of the Practical and Applied section of the test. Our 7-day study guide devotes an entire day to studying exercise technique, as it is a large part of the exam. In order to pass this section, you must be familiar with all techniques in the CSCS curriculum. This includes stretching techniques, traditional resistance training, non-traditional resistance training, running, sprinting, agility, and change of direction. While you can be asked about any of these various modalities of strength conditioning, the CSCS tends to prefer to ask its test takers about traditional barbell Olympic lifting, as well as non-traditional Olympic lifts such as the log clean and press and tire flips. In the Practical and Applied section, you will be given video demonstrations of various movements and lifts. You must be able to identify what was correct and what was incorrect, as well as the specific error made. The specific topics in the exercise technique section include identifying and explaining proper technique for all exercises, including breathing and focus, monitoring safety and spotting techniques, assessments, corrections, and modifications, and proper technique when it comes to proper recovery activities. In this domain, you will almost certainly be asked at least 1 to 2 techniques from every relevant chapter, with a heavy focus on compound resistance exercise techniques. Program design is the 5th domain in the CSCS exam and is probably one of the more fun sections to study. Program design tests your ability to plan athlete-specific programs depending on the sport, the season, and the individual aspects of the athlete. Questions do range in difficulty, but will push your program design knowledge to the brink. Topics covered in the program design section include needs analysis, athlete assessment, incorporating different training methods for different training outcomes, proper application of exercise order, properly assigning exercise intensities for aerobic and anaerobic exercises, properly assigning training volume and set rep schemes for specific outcomes, determining and assigning work to rest ratios, deloading and detraining, determining work to rest periods, recovery and unloading, and finally, designing programs for athletes during injury and rehabilitation. The sixth domain in the CSCS exam is organization and administration. Although the smallest and albeit probably most boring section of the exam, it is still important and you cannot afford to miss too many questions in this section. It isn't necessary to spend excessive amounts of time on this section due to the smaller amounts of questions. However, understanding the organization and administration of the NSCA standards is still important for passing the exam. Key topics in this section include knowing what processes are included in each phase of facility design, knowing the space requirements for each piece of equipment, knowing the proper procedure for disciplinary action of an athlete in the facility, and finally, understanding the NSCA's professional practice standards and guidelines. The final domain in the practical and applied section of the CSCS exam is testing, ongoing monitoring, and evaluation. The testing and evaluation category is only 20 questions and is contained in just 2 chapters in the NSCA's textbook. In this part of the test, you can expect to see questions on basically every topic covered in chapters 12 and 13 of the 4th edition of the NSCA's strength and conditioning textbook. The topics included in this section are knowing how to conduct and administer all of the common tests for athletic performance, understanding the different measures of reliability and validity when it comes to measuring the test itself, knowing how to select the appropriate test based on the sport, the specific position, and the athlete, and finally, understanding how to interpret data using statistical tools like mean, median, and standard deviation. Hey guys, I hope you've been enjoying the video so far. If you have, please do us a favor and crush that like button and subscribe for more videos in the future. Now that we've covered both sections and all of the domains covered in the NSCA CSCS exam, let's get into breaking down our optimal 1-week study schedule. The following study plan distills everything down into a 7-day study schedule. However, it does assume that you do have the 6 to 8 hours needed to study every day. This study plan assumes an equal percentage on all the various domains in your practice tests, and then allots the study time based on the weight of the exam. You will have to adjust the amount of study time on each section based on your study results. Refer to the CSCS cheat sheet and the section breakdowns for a full day's focus. We do recommend using the CSCS cheat sheet, the CSCS textbook, and Trainer Academy's CSCS study guide as your main study materials. Focus on the CSCS cheat sheet first and branch into different topics covered in the textbook and the Trainer Academy study guide. On day 1 of our 7-day study plan, I'm going to have you do 3 different things. Number 1, you're going to read the NSCA's official study guide if possible. Number 2, you're going to take a properly weighted assessment to identify your weak and strong areas. You can do this by taking any of the Trainer Academy CSCS practice tests. And number 3, you're going to begin studying. We're going to start with the most in-depth section, which is the exercise science section. And you're also going to allot time for some of the weaker areas that you found in your initial assessment. On day 1, aim for at least 4 hours on the exercise science section, and if you have a bit more time, start to focus more on those weaker areas we found earlier. On day 2 of your 7-day study plan, we are only focusing on 2 topics. Number 1 is to study exercise science for at least 5 hours. And number 2 is to study sports psychology for at least 3 hours. Day 3 is only going to consist of 2 different sections as well. You're going to initially review the sports nutrition section for about 3 hours. Number 2, you're going to study exercise technique for the major exercises as well as watch the additional videos for about 5 hours. Day 4 is going to be split into 2 4-hour chunks. The first chunk is going to be 4 hours of program design, and the second chunk is going to be 4 hours of testing and evaluation. On day 5, you'll combine all aspects of the practical applied section, including exercise technique, program design, and needs analysis on your preferred sport. On day 5, you will combine all aspects of the practical applied knowledge on exercise science, program design, and testing and evaluation on your preferred sport of choice. You'll spend the entire day on this project, so get as detailed as possible and include every element discussed. You are first going to conduct a practice needs analysis for your preferred sport. Next, you're going to design a program based on your needs analysis, and you're going to include the following: a full program including a off-season, a preseason, a in-season, and a postseason for your sport. An appropriate assessment battery at the beginning of the season for your sport. Flexibility, strength, power, and aerobic programming as appropriate for your specific sport. Include traditional and non-traditional implement training in the correct order for each workout. Assign total volume, loads, tempos, rep schemes, work to rest ratios, and all other appropriate program design variables as appropriate for your sport. And finally, plan deloads, tapering, and reconditioning as appropriate for your athlete. On day 6, you will review the organization and administration components of the CSCS curriculum for the first half of your day. Pay special attention to the phases of facility development and the liability reduction components of the organization and administration section. After you've studied this section, be sure to retake the Trainer Academy practice test and assess your improvements over the various categories of knowledge. Note any improvements to your score and any areas of weakness. Be sure to note and celebrate the improvements to your score and note any continued areas of weakness. Well, you finally made it to day 7. I know it's been a long week, but today is going to be a bit lighter than most days. On your final day of studying, revisit the practice test you took on day 6 and dial in on the areas of weakness that you noted. If you have a passing score on all the sections, allocate your time to what you feel are your weakest sections, or you can allocate that time to what is most heavily weighted on the CSCS exam. Now, we don't recommend you take an additional retest on day 7. We find that it won't be the best use of your time and may end up psyching you out in regards to taking the test the next day. After your 7-day study marathon, be sure to get a good night's rest, have a great breakfast, and go and crush that exam.